I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the after show of Nailed It. We're talking everything season 4, episode 3, called Indiana Fails and the Temple of Slop. I'm your host, Alyssa Acosta Milan, and I am so excited that despite the fact there was a little bit of speculation from the fans on Twitter that are fans of Nailed It saying they thought this might be an April Fool's joke, that Nailed It wasn't going to be released today, but it was, and I'm so glad it is, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be here with my awesome co-hosts. I have Eric Jewell, whose birthday happens to be tomorrow, and hopefully he's not making his own birthday cake because he's admitted he does a lot of fails in the kitchen. Hey, Eric.
Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, it's true. I am just like the contestants. I can't bake for anything unless it's banana bread.
And we also have Miss Lisa K. Satchel, who also says she doesn't really have too many nailed it in the kitchen. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad the season is back. I'm excited to talk about episode 3. It's going to be great.
Well, we're going to get right to it. We're going to talk everything from the competitions to the winners and the guest judge, who the guest judge is Gemma. And I'm a little bit nervous about that because she's a baker herself. So I think the contestants are in for a little treat. But before we get to everything, what did you guys think about the episode? We'll start with you, Eric.
Overall, I really liked the theme of this episode. The first thing where they had to build all the hatchlings, I was so happy. And of course, I was so crushed when the little turtle didn't turn out well. He was my favorite one. And he just looked like a lump. And I was so upset by it.
What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, poor Cheri, man. She was trying so hard, but she left her egg on a little fire for too long. And then it just melted in half. It was so hard. But they all pulled it together as best they could, as usual.
And speaking of Cheri, so we know that she's retired, so she has a lot of time to bake. I was thinking, is this going to help her throughout the challenges? I guess we'll have to tune in to see that. We have Carolyn, who is a lawyer, and she's hoping to go from banking to baking. And then JJ, who has an obsession with Bigfoot cakes. What did you guys think about his obsession with the Bigfoot?
I thought it made for a great gag. Anytime that Wes was on screen and they panned over to him, I thought it was the best part. Like, it was the best jokes of this episode to me. Just having Wes just freeze in the background and just quickly go away before JJ could see him.
Yeah, at first I didn't. Sorry, go ahead. At first I didn't feel like the bit of it all, but then I was like, oh wait, he's Bigfoot. It's Bigfoot sighting.
So we go to the Baker's Choice Challenge, and like every episode, I'm always nervous for them to open that door because you never know what they're going to bake, which is interesting because the first round is always supposed to be the easiest, but it never turns out that way. So what did you guys think of what they had to make with the hatchlings?
I had no clue how I would have gone. I didn't know there were molds to make an egg like that. So I'm panicking. I'm sitting there panicking like, I don't know how anybody's going to do that. How are you going to get a hollow inside for an egg like this? And I was like, oh, a mold. This is why I'm not on this show right now. I would have failed right off the bat right there.
But it was interesting that they had to put a special mix inside of it, because at first it looks like, okay, this might be really easy. You just put some white chocolate, temper it in there, make a mold, and then they kind of went into everything. And it did not look like it was easy at all. Lisa, walk me through what you thought about how they did throughout the competition.
I thought everybody held their own. Like Eric was saying, I'm not positive I would have been off the bat like, oh, I need to use a mold. So it was nice that everyone, knew what they had to do with the mold. But when it came down to filling it, Jaques was like, oh, I would have put in the filling after I put the 2 eggs together. I'm like, how would you even do that? And why would a person even think of that? So it's just crazy to me that Jaques was like, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And then we were like, but how? Oh, you're right, because you know how to do this.
Why do we ever question Jaques when he speaks?
And it seemed like everybody was having a hard time making the chocolate, especially Cheri, because she was like, do we have to make the egg? That was just hilarious to me. I'm like, yes, you have to make everything. Like Nicole said, that's the challenge. It's not just the little animal on top.
Oh, that was the best line of the show. Cheri's like, oh, do we have to make the egg too? Yes, you have to make the entire thing. Have you seen the show before?
And
That's
I
some
love
of the
how
best parts there.
I love how Gemma, the guest judge, just because she's a baker herself, it was like second nature for her to give tips. And Nicole's like, you can't do that. Don't tell her not to do that. She's got to figure it out herself. And I'm like, give her tips.
And also because Gemma had been a judge before. So she was just like, I want to help because last time I wanted to help. Like, it's really funny.
So what did you guys think when it was time for the judging? How did you think overall everything was going to turn out?
Overall, everything to me kind of was just like, wow, you managed to scrape something together.
A plus for that.
Yeah, the only little cake pop that I was able to make out was the chicken. Like the chameleon was completely just a blob. I felt so bad. I really wanted that turtle to work out well and just couldn't. But yeah, I was not surprised that JJ won with the chicken, just because that was the only one that I could tell exactly as, oh, this is what this animal is supposed to be.
Did anybody think that chicken looked a little bit like Chicken Little, except maybe like a more devious Chicken Little? That's exactly what I thought when I first saw it.
Oh yeah,
definitely like a melted Chicken Little.
Yeah, those demon eyes were not sitting well with me. I was like, oh, I don't want to look at this thing anymore.
And what did you think, Lisa, of the prizes that JJ won? So he won chocolates. He didn't win like a mixer or something that they usually win. He won chocolates from Jaques.
Which I think is really cool. You might as well get chocolate from the man himself, the man of chocolate. So I thought that was super cool. And it was nice to be like, oh, Jaques, we can get some of your chocolate. We can actually try it. Like, you know, really dope.
And then we move on to the second round, which it's going to get a lot harder. So they end up having to make a 3-layer Sphinx cake in 1 hour and 45 minutes. Now, to a baker that actually knows what they're doing, that might be enough time. But to somebody on Nailed It, that's like 20 minutes, right, guys?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think knowing to carve down the cake into the shape is always a struggle.
Exactly. I mean, it looks like a really good cake, except when you're making it, it looks like there's a lot of components together. And with Caroline, she had a bunch of uneven cake pans. She's like, I'm not going to measure these. They kind of look like they'll go together. I'll just fix it later. What did you guys think about that?
That's one of my favorite things when contestants are just like, oh, this looks about right. It might be a bit big. We'll just like trim it down later. It's like, no, get the bases right. Make sure you have the right amount of layers. Make sure you have the right sizes, because you don't have time to come back later to fix all of these mistakes you made at the very beginning. It's just going to bite you later.
I think a lot of them wing it, which brings me to JJ, because he's just throwing milk in there and not even measuring it. He's basically winging it. And Jaques like, you can't just wing it. You have to actually measure it, especially because he's not like a profound baker where he knows what he's doing. He's just throwing things in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, JJ was so like, oh, I just want to make sure it looks good. But like, you know what I mean? This is a 50-50, like you were saying, 50-50. Like you can't have half of it and win.
And then he forgot to put eggs in it. So he takes pan out of the oven and puts it into the mixture that was sitting on the counter. And the judges are all, whoa, what are you doing? Not a good call at all. And he's like, it's fine. And he's just mixing it back and forth. And Gemma's like, okay, this is not going to be great whatsoever, but keep doing what you're doing. What did you guys think of that?
Yeah, that's one of the things I always find super funny about the show is just once something is in the oven, at that point, I'm like, if it's not ready,
to it.
You've already committed to it. Just do your best. Otherwise, if you're going to take it out, you may as well just completely start over, because once it starts baking and you try and add something new to it, it's already going to be a jumbled mess anyway. You might as well just start from scratch or just go with what you have.
Exactly. And I mean, you could tell he wasn't even paying attention, because Wes is walking around as Bigfoot. He didn't even see that. So I'm like, if you didn't see him walking around as Bigfoot, are you actually even paying attention to your cake? And it was interesting because I felt this episode, things went by so quick, and that looked like it was such a hard cake. I'm sure for them, it seems like they have like 5 or 10 minutes. To us, we're like, okay, you guys have like a lot of time here. So at the end, the results, what did you guys think of how they turned out, Lisa?
I thought they were good enough. They were as good as we could have hoped for. You know what I mean?
They were, from a scale 10, how would you rate their overall cake?
I would say a solid 5 around the board. Honestly, they did the best they could. Bless their hearts.
I love when they were talking about Caroline's cake and they said it looked like a Buddha. And it really did, just like how everything looked, and it was like half melted. But I mean, she tried. We got to give her effort for that, right?
Definitely an A for effort.
Yeah, I was impressed that at the end, I was like, oh, all of these are sphinxes. Like, if I hadn't been watching the episode and I just saw, I was like, oh, are they trying to make a sphinx? I was super impressed that they even got the base shape that somebody would randomly know this is what you were making for this attempt.
And Lisa, what did you think about Cheri's cake?
I was gonna say Cheri did a good job. She did the best she could. She had the little eye, the little nose. I think she did a really good job. Yeah. I think she the molding of the face was actually really good.
And considering the fact that this episode, which is rare for them to do, they didn't have an advantage button for the person that did the worst. And they didn't have any extra help from Jaques for any of the competitors. I was really surprised about that. I don't know why they would take that out. I kind of like that in there, especially because you need that 3 minutes with Jaques, especially when you're forgetting eggs or your dough is getting too hard, you know?
Yeah, it really threw me for a minute because I had to rewind to be like, wait, they didn't give the person who did the worst, they didn't give them an extra bonus, which I really like when they have those because it throws a wrench into everybody else's plans and it stops like the natural flow and it brings everything to a halt for that person. So they have to get their mind back into baking once they get pulled out of it. So I was like, oh, that kind of just felt like a missing aspect of the episode for me.
And you really do get a... Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. I will say in comparison to other episodes, this cake was a little more straightforward than we've seen. Like it was just like 3 cakes, shave it down a little bit into like the circular shape, and then make a face and some legs. So it was a little bit less difficult than other things that have been on previous episodes.
But it's funny when they do the advantages, well, at least for one person, and the other 2 have to do stuff, because in some of them, like we saw last episode where they had to do all the dancing, it's a workout. So you're already running around the kitchen trying to find all your ingredients, and then you're over here having to dance for 3 minutes. Like that's kind of like the last thing you want to do. So somebody could really use that to advantage to kind of sit out your competitors for 3 minutes. Aren't you guys like, are we on the same page with that one?
Totally, 100%.
Yeah. It like I said, it throws off their rhythm of having to get back into the mindset of just baking instead of focusing on whatever distraction they have going on.
And getting back to the finished cakes. Now, it was interesting because with JJ, he forgot something back at his station. But you know, when Nicole says, you're done, you are done. So there's nothing else you can do. If your cake falls, if you forget something, then you just have to give them what you have. And they basically like called him out like, hey, didn't you forget something? And he's like, oh yeah, I meant to forget my mummies. And Jaques like, did you?
Yeah.
So Eric, what did you think about the winner of the whole round?
I wasn't super shocked that it was Cheri. Like hers was the cake that I was like, okay, that's a sphinx. And from what I can remember, they didn't really have that many negative things to say about like the taste of her cake. So overall, I was like, oh yeah, that was the right, I agreed. I thought it was the right call that she was the one that should have won over JJ and Caroline.
Well, I thought JJ might have had it, and judges were talking about the fact, well, you kind of were disqualified because you forgot the mummies. You didn't complete the challenge. I feel like he might have won had he not forgotten that. So he might have made a $10,000 mistake right then and there.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Wes came out dressed as Indiana Jones. He kind of did like a forward tumble out. I love when he comes out because you never know what he's going to wear.
Yeah.
And then Nicole's just like, oh, Wes. Oh, sweet Wes. So, now we're going to go to the news part of our segment. Lisa K.
Hey, so it was kind of cool that they did like eggs this episode because Jaques actually has come out with Easter stuff. He has like a whole line of like, there are bunnies with different expressions. There are different chickens. There's a puppy involved. All these like little packages you can buy for Easter baskets. So it's so cute because it's like, oh, Jaques also going on that we can check out. That's really so
nice. And we have our special segment by Eric.
Yeah, so since this episode was more Indiana Jones themed and the final product was the Sphinx, I wanted to ask you guys, which famous landmark would you guys like to see them have to build in a future episode?
Ooh, I would have to say Mount Rushmore. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've ever seen them do that before, but I think
No, I
that's
think you're
because
right.
there's so many presidents. That would be super hard, and you don't want to mess up a president's face. So maybe they shouldn't do that because I feel like that would be a huge failed it by the contestants. What about you, Lisa?
I think it'd be cool to do like a tribute to New York. So maybe have like the Empire State Building. They have to build like a little apple, a little taxi to go with it. Like that would be really fun.
Nice. And what about you, Eric?
I'm on the same lines as Lisa. I think something in New York based, more like the Statue of Liberty, where you have to use like a lot of chocolate to like get everything to stay and like mold it well. Yeah. So I think something in like a New York City skyline would be a really good one for them to build.
Nice. Well, thanks everyone